welcome back to another episode here on the Wellness Path podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Vic, and I'm excited to have you here as we're going through this series um, of a journey of brain development for kids. So if you have children, looking to have children and so forth, this is the journey, the pyramid of layering up to how I see things and what the research shows and my experiences in 11, 12 years, 15 years plus being a chiropractor. I had a practice for 11 years and just got back in this year in 2024. Actually, I have two locations, and it's one of the things where the process of how we help kiddos really thrive, where the issues really start, and how this disrupts development, and how it's a snowball effect. It's not something that says, well, my kid now all of a sudden is having speech delays, or I noticed my kid didn't crawl until he was 15 and didn't walk till almost 2 years old, or I noticed that they were doing W sitting, but I didn't think anything of it, or they scooted, or hey, I skipped crawling, or my kid's clumsy, he just falls all the time. There's actually reasons behind all these things, and there's simple clues to know brain development is not at its optimal level. So in the episode, if you want to listen to the full series, listen to last week's episode where I dive deep into the beginning process of what I used to look at, which is primary reflexes. These are postural and primitive. And even as a chiropractor myself, I share my own personal stories of clinical data of what I've gone through in 11 years, my frustrations, and how combining this neural approach that I look at from many different avenues to access, it's different pieces that I access through and so much more. Before we get into today's topic, though, make sure to check us out. You got links in the bio. Check out our website. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on our YouTube channel. Subscribe as we're starting to branch out this material. And if you're in the Knoxville area or in the Morristown area, definitely reach out. Let us know you heard us from the podcast. And last but not least, if you are looking for a chiropractor, reach out to us. We have a huge network that we can refer you to if you're looking for a chiropractor for your child, yourself, your family, and so much more. All right, so let's get into today's topic here. So remember, as I said, everything is like a build. It's a one step to the next step to the next step. So how does the base get affected, right? So the base, again, like I shared in last episode, I go much more in detail. It's those postural primitive reflexes. It is the nervous system itself. It's what state is that brain, the nervous system in, that is going to disrupt a lot of the developmental process. And we've done some other episodes like brain development, and we have blogs where we talk about brain development, why it's so critically important to get access to the kiddos immediately. I think every kid, before they're a thought, should be evaluated. And that means mom, get adjusted, dad, get adjusted, because it helps with sperm quality. It helps with conceiving. It helps get the body prepared, ready for mom, everything in alignment, allows for the synergy of hormones to be in a better state, more regulated. I mean, I can go on and on. But then when kiddo comes out, it's usually, adjustments are critical, but after 2 weeks for sure, because we'll start to see exactly what's going on. If there was anything, so it kind of now starts to show up. And that's where we can start to put a plan of action together to really help do these things and so much more. So when we have the base being affected, now the second layer of brain development gets affected. And one of the things that we're going to see, okay, now this affects in many different ways, is going to be things like the visual. So visual can be something as simple as a misalignment in the neck. Sometimes people call that torticollis. But infants will favor a certain side versus the other. I always see it when they're carried. I watch them, like when moms are bringing babies in, I'm always watching the baby, seeing what their head is positioned. And then I'll notate that in my head. Sometimes I'll make a note if they're a patient, and I'll see if they're always head tilt to a certain side. That's a visual acuity. Instead of being straight on, they're seeing life like this, and their brain's developing that way and seeing that angle, always seeing the world tilted. So if you're not watching this on video, tilt your head to the right, and that's how you see your life as normal. And that's what they see, and their brain develops that way. But it can also be visual acuity with eyes, myopias, lazy eyes, things like that, where those things can develop also. So it can be the actual visual itself, but it can play a role in many different things. I had moms sometimes through care, they'd be like, my son or my daughter's vision's getting better. This is kind of weird. And I'd be like, it can potentially happen. I'm not saying it will for every kiddo. I'm not saying chiropractic, hey, we can help with getting people's eyes to get better. But what it can do is it can improve it in potentially. I've had experiences with this myself. Even my own personal journey. Like sometimes I love going to the optometrist. I don't go as regular as I should every year. I go probably every 5 years, but it's one of those things when I'm there, they're like, wow, your vision's at this and this. And I'll be like, cool. I've had that since I was 18 years old. They go, really? I was like, yeah, it has not changed since I was 19. And they're like, that's not normal. Usually it will get worse over time. And I'm like, not mine. That's just been my experience. Now, I have reasons behind that, and I do tell them chiropractic works wonders, and they look at me like I'm crazy. And I say, you just got to look at the C1 axis, the nerve axis, and then there, and then all these other things. And they're like, okay, get out of here. Thank you so much. So we have that. Then we have the auditory side of things, right? So auditory is going to be how they hear things. How is the sound coming in through the ears? How is it affecting them? Because learning is through auditory. Speaking and language is through auditory. We even know now, there's new research coming out that in adults, one of the things about memory is when you start losing your hearing, you actually start having memories. Your memory is not as sharp. Some new studies coming out. So it's very important, and it relates to memory growth and development in certain pathways in the brain, and that's going to play a huge role. But auditory stuff can be affected. They're not hearing things as well. They don't hear things as clear, so their pronunciation worse. So you can see how this affects different layers as we get into there's stages to this. So I'm kind of setting the stage on this a little bit. And this is Dr. DeMillo's work. So I'm sharing a lot of his stuff. He has a pyramid on this, and it relates to a lot of the work I do. As a pediatric chiropractor, I thought this was great. Just share this with you guys. So you have that. So you get the auditory, and these are, again, it's going to affect, if they're not hearing sounds clear and crystal clear, that is going to affect speech. That's going to affect development, picking up on words. They're going to be delayed in language and so many other things. Motor, and it's not just language as like speaking, it's also hearing and understanding tremendously. Then we have the tactile function, right? Sensory. Kids pick up so much from hands. I mean, look at infants. They put everything in their mouth, and everyone's like, right? Well, I think sometimes they're trying to get to know their environment from the bacterial side of things, but they're also just learning to touch. They want to stimulate them. You have 50,000 nerve endings on your hands. It's one of those things where it stimulates a lot of brain development, and it's very, very critical for them to have that. And now, so if we're having textile issues, we're not improving brain development as well as it should. Now, I'm oversimplifying a lot of these guys, but I want to keep it simple for the podcast because I'm going to start connecting the dots of what we see and how this all relates. Then we have vestibular, right? My child's clumsy. They just fall all over the place. Try to walk a couple times and they just fall. And that is one thing, but vestibular plays a lot of role too in other areas of the brain, in other centers of the brain. But I'm going to keep it simple with vestibular as balance. And so this is where their coordination, hand-eye coordination is not great. Sometimes I see this with when I'm working with developmental delays. They'll have something like catching a ball for 3-year-olds. And it's like they just can't, right? And so that means there's a vestibular system that is not functioning as well. So balance, coordination, just things along that nature are going to be input them. Now imagine in life, you're trying to deal with gravity and you're trying to walk. There's a delay here. They don't have it firing as well as it should. Crawling is just not the symptoms of firing. Pathways are not firing as well as they should. So these all play a role in the developmental stages of things. And then we get proprioception, which is the big thing. This is what chiropractors are huge at. I call this the good input to the brain. And so when you have proprioception, this is good input to the brain. This keeps the brain young. It keeps it active. It keeps it functioning. Your brain loves proprioception. The more you can get a proprioception, the better. This is why they say motion is life. In chiropractic, we say the spine moves well, the brain's going to function well. And so what will happen is because now all of a sudden they're not getting the full range of motion, they're not stimulating good proprioception. This is going to be what we call bad input. I've done podcasts on this before, but this is where chiropractors, we talk about this. And I have a whole video series on this. If you guys want to learn more about this, check out the link in my show notes. I have a workshop that's called The Domino Effect. It's the 4-part video series, but it is very in-depth. But one of the things that's going to give you answers on is why that we see this happen and more of this effect. So you can kind of, if you want to, skip all the things that I'm going to go to ahead of time in this, you can go watch that video series there. It's in the show notes. But long story short, this affects now when you have lack of proprioception in chiropractic when babies are born. Their head, remember I said the head tilts one way or the other. Every baby I ever see favors one or the other. And so what that means now is you have a lack of proprioception, a lack of good input going into the brain. This is absolutely critical for a developing brain. The brain needs this. This is how it grows. This is how it expands and develops and evolves. And so when we don't have that, all of a sudden now the brain's not getting to the levels where it needs to. And remember, if you don't do well in one area, one section of that brain, now everything from there gets affected. And so then we have to look at, all right, so here we go. Just to kind of give you a recap here, we have the base being affected, which you said was, I've been saying it's the nervous system, it's the communication system that's getting affected. You have the primary and postural reflexes and the primitive reflexes. And so we have that being disturbed and not functioning well. From there, now we go to the next layer, which is we're going to see that effect, which is going to be the vestibular system. We got the proprioceptive, remember, balance and hand-eye coordination, balance, and things like that. We have proprioception, which means we're not getting good proper input into the brain. So now all of a sudden we're creating, in chiropractic, what we see is when you have lack of good input, and I share this with adults, I share this with kids, I share this with every single person I work with. When you have lack of good input to the brain can't create good output. Whatever goes up to the brain is what's coming out. That's just the rule how neurology works. And that's how the brain works. So when you have not good input, you're going to have bad input. And bad input stresses the nervous system. It stresses it. It creates bad output. So you may say, well, what the heck's bad output? Well, bad output can be, for an adult, this is poor posture. This is tightness in certain muscles. This is imbalances in the spine. This is a lack of regulation. This is for kids the same way, less healing and so forth. Your body's more stressed. The nervous system is more stressed. It's not communicating as well as it should. It's not at ease. So now all of a sudden it has to work harder to get things done. So you're burning up more energy. This is why, everyone's talking about like the new things like brain fog. Everyone has it. So many more people have brain fog and lack of mental clarity. And I'm always looking going, yeah, we need people to be more adjusted. Here's a prime example. I've been adjusting since I've been 19 years old. And I will tell you, whenever I have brain fog, it only happens when I'm under the weather, or I'm extremely I've been way too much exposed to electromagnetic fields. Those are the two times. Sometimes fragrances will do it too, but those are the things that I know when I have mental fog. Other than that, I don't get mental fog. It is very rare for me to have mental fog. Now, I'm not saying I'm supernatural or anything. It has nothing to do with that. I'm trying to share with you that chiropractic is what has been the biggest thing. Now, I have a very clean diet. I take a ton of supplements. I work out. I do all these other things for my health. And I think that all plays a role. I think they're all important because it's all about holistically. You got to use all these things at once. You can't just say, I'm just going to take supplements and I'm going to be healthy. I'm not going to work out. I remember I shared a post just a week ago about how health and wellness without chiropractic is fraud. And, for the most part, a lot of people liked it. I have a lot of chiropractors on my page. But there were some chiropractors that didn't like it, thought it was harsh. And I'm like, but when you understand what the nervous system does, I mean, how can you say, oh, I have the best, I have the best computer, but I only get 50% electricity to it? It's not going to function well. And so the same thing happens here when we're looking at kids and developments in the brain and so much more. We need these communication systems to work well, because if that proprioception is not firing, the brain doesn't develop well. And they're going to have issues that'll show up down the road. And that's just to say issues. It's going to be challenges. And I would tell a parent, never wait till there's a symptom. Just never wait till there's a symptom. Sometimes I'll have an adult, but most of the time what will happen is I'll see an adult for pain of some sort. They get better. They're blown away. They've tried all these things. Didn't work. They get better. Then all of a sudden they're like, hey, can this work for my son? He suffers, let's say he has ADHD or he has trouble learning or speech or whatever that may be. And I'm like, or it could be a girl, daughter, it doesn't matter. And they'd be like, yeah, I can help. We get in there. And then they'd be like, wow, this helped here. And they have another kiddo and they're like, hey, you know what? Can we just have them seen too? I mean, I'm bringing her anyhow or him anyhow. Why not? I said, yeah, let's get him evaluated. And then I'll recommend that almost the same plan. This is the one who has issues, but this is the one who doesn't. And they'll look and go, well, hold up here. She has all this stuff going on, or he does. And my other child, they don't really have a lot going on. I said, they don't have a lot of symptoms going on, but neurologically, they have a ton of stuff going on. And sometimes it's even worse. I had one time a family, 5 come to me. And I remember when they all came in, I kind of gave the mom a heads up. And this is why I don't do this anymore. I was kind of giving mom a heads up. One of the kiddos was highly functionally autistic. And I kind of said, his care plan based on my experiences, will probably be the longest. So I'm just giving you a heads up. And she's like, that's probably fine. I totally see that. I totally understand that. He tied with one of his other siblings as being the shortest based on objective findings. And he had great results and so forth. And the oldest had the longest one, who had was one of her best from a health perspective, looking from outside, best child that had no issues, rarely gets sick, all just good behavior, all these things. But neurologically, it was a whole different story. And that's why I say it's so critically important, because this is the root cause. And yet, because it's not above ground, think of it like a tree or a plant, we don't think of the roots being the issue. And this is where the root cause is. And so the proprioception, the vestibular, the tactile function, auditory, right? So auditory is all about developing speech and language, memory processing, and so much more. Visual cues, visualization, visually being able to see clearly, but also eye tracking stuff, because again, eyes have to track a proper way. I'm working with a couple of kiddos right now where that's part of their homework, is eye tracking showed up as not tracking things well. And I said, how's his hand-eye coordination? And they're like, not great at all. I said, okay. So right off the bat, just trying to see how this plays a role. Because again, as I build up into this, I'm gonna get into some more deeper stuff, and I'll share how this is more relatable. I know sometimes you're like, well, I want the meat and potatoes. If you want that, check out the video series of the domino effect, and it'll give you all that and so much more. But so I'm doing the eye tracking, and I knew there was a couple things, and then we did some balance tests. Couldn't even stand on one foot. And I'm like, okay, we got vestibular system, right? Drastically affected. We have visual issues going on, and we have proprioception. And then all of a sudden, when I'm talking, I could tell that the auditory is not processing well, because there's a lot of times I'll say something really clear, and sometimes I mumble. I can sometimes, but when I'm with patients, I try to be as clear as I can. But long story short, he'd be like, what? Excuse me? Huh? And I'd be like, all right. So that's my cues. Now, tactile, I don't know about. But I got 4 out of the 5 right there on a kid who's 9, 10 years old. And so we have eye tracking showed up, and that's how I knew he couldn't track. I saw a little bit of what's called nystagmus in his eyes, and I was like, okay, it's an eye tracking issue. And then I was like, he has a hand-eye coordination issue. They're like, yep, he has a big issue with that. He has this, and this going on, And so all of a sudden I'm like, here we go. So the language processing aspect of it, that is being affected. So chiropractically, we got to work on reconnecting and getting these base stuff solid. And once we can do that, then from there, next level gets created, and we start clearing those things out. Hand-eye coordination comes up. And sometimes we need to do extra stuff on the outside of it. Chiropractic's not the end-all, be-all. And I tell people that very clearly about that. That's why we need support systems on what we're doing to help really do that. It's a very systematic, logical, linear approach, but it gets the results. And sometimes they take longer than others. The thing about this work is there's no like, hey, do this, and you'll be good at this time frame. It's do this work, and eventually the brain's going to connect. It eventually will. I've seen it every single time. Sometimes it doesn't connect as well as we would like it to, but it does connect. I have a kid right now I'm working with who's a little over 3, and it's one of those things where the progress has been slow, but it's progress. It's slow, but it's progress. And sometimes I have to reiterate that to parents, like it's progress. We're moving in a direction naturally. I'm not forcing anything into that body. I'm not forcing it. I'm not doing any of that. I'm working with the natural systems of this body. And sometimes some people just take longer than others. That's why I tell parents all the time, don't hold on to the time frame. Hold on to where we want to go, where we're going to go. And I'll look at things from an objective perspective. I'm like the tour. I'm the guide. I know, I know where we're going. I got this. We're going to monitor along the way. Share your concerns when you have them, but I'm going to monitor everything along the way. And as long as I'm seeing progress, thumbs up. I tell parents, I tell my adult patients this, tell everybody this. I always tell them, like, I'm very easygoing, and I'm not going to overreact on something. So when something shows up, this is the same concept of like when you are on a plane and there's turbulence. The only way you know the turbulence is really bad, watch the flight attendants, how fast they're moving, how fast they get in their seats, and look at the facial expressions they have. That's going to tell you where they are. And I tell them the same thing. If I'm calm about it, that means this is not something that's a red flag yet. If I'm not calm about it, and usually what I'll tell patients is I'll be like, listen, I'm a little concerned here. I think we need to do this, or this, and so forth. So long story short, we talked now about the sensory systems. We talked about the primary reflex systems. Okay, so the primary reflex is chiropractic and so forth. That's the foundation. And then we have the secondary now that gets for the second part now That's going to affect their sensory systems. You have to understand the sensory system. That's how they develop and grow. And if we're not getting all the proper sensory inputs, we're having even more brain defects. We're having development, and we have a lack of brain development to not allow them to thrive the way they were naturally designed to. And this affects every facet of their life. Yes, the weakest link always shows up, but it doesn't mean they're not affecting anything else, because it will in some way, shape, or form. And so the key component is, again, what's the solution? Chiropractic care, first and foremost. Working with a chiropractor who knows how to do these looking at these primary and primitive and postural reflexes, to know how to implement and help you track and follow and help to develop with that. And if you have a really good chiropractor, but they don't do that part, go to an OT then. But you got to work it in conjunction. I'm telling you, I can't tell you how many times I've worked with OTs where they would, patients would go to OTs for like a year. And I love OTs. They're my favorite to work with. And it's one of those things where they will be like, man, progress is moving. It's just slow. And they're like, it takes a while. And then all of a sudden they'll start chiropractic care. And like 2 months later, like, holy cow, progress has been skyrocketing. What's going on here? And I'm like, we're getting to the root, right? We're getting to that foundation, getting things communicating, then allows for the primary reflexes, the primitives and the postural reflexes to start to be what's called integrated. So turn off sometimes. And then from there, everything just starts to accelerate. And that's the beautiful thing of this process. So that's what I got for you guys today. Again, if you're loving this stuff and you're like, man, I want more, check out the video series in there. It's a 4-part video series. Like I said, I go very far in depth with sharing how this all plays a role in the domino effect, and I connect the dots to everything that relates to every single, ADHD, alphabetical soup, autism on the spectrum, variety of different parts of that, allergies and asthmas and XYZ. That 4-part video series covers that and so much more. So you can check all that out there if you want more of the meat and potatoes. If not, stick around to next week, and I'll dive deeper in to getting into what I talked about. Remember I said about the vestibular system, lazy eye, and all that stuff? I'm going to go deeper into that a little bit. I'm going to get into some motor planning, how the brain develops things, how it tracks things and uses dexterities and so much. And then we're going to get into other aspects when it comes into bilateral integration, which is so much more we'll get into. But I'm going to start connecting the dots with you from a motor development standpoint. And then I want to tap into some of that sensory processing and perceptual motor. So these are the 2 next levels that we're going to get into next week. So without any further ado, this is Dr. Vic Manzo. And until next time, keep rocking and rolling.